Welcome, ladies and gentlemen. Adam Green here with nomorenews.org. It's October 23rd, 2019, and joining me today to discuss Adam Green here. Joining me today to discuss Noahide laws, Zionism, and much more. My guest, one of the world's most famous Messianic Jews, Dr. Michael L. Brown. He is a Jewish believer in Jesus, author of 37 books. He's a syndicated nationally radio host. His show, The Line of Fire. He's on YouTube at Ask Dr. Brown. He's an activist, professor at many seminary schools, preacher, husband, and he's joining me today to discuss Noahide laws and much more. Thank you so much for coming, Dr. Michael Brown.
And Adam, I really appreciate you having me on. Thanks so much.
Thank you for being here. So, a little background information for everybody on how we got here. And on my channel and some of the other channels I follow on YouTube, we're talking about Noahide laws. We all see it as a concern to Christians and to the whole world. And a while back, I first saw a video where you said there's more truth to Santa Claus than to Noahide laws. You remember that?
Oh yeah. That Jews will be beheading Christians over Noahide laws. Yeah, someone had called in and asked me the question, which was quite a surprise to me. I wasn't aware of what you were putting out, or Stephen Ben Noon or others. So I answered the question candidly, and then I got quite a lot of pushback. That's when I discovered you and some of the other folks that have a good internet following. I was quite surprised to hear some of this. Obviously, it's very serious to you and your viewers and followers, so we'll do our best to be as candid as possible on this.
Absolutely. And since then, I heard that because I was doing so much research, and I just saw Noahide laws are, everywhere. It's documented extensively. And then I kind of jumped on you a bit because I heard, it's like Santa Claus, and I'm thinking, oh, well, that's incredible. But since then, you've done a few more videos, and I've heard your more expanded on explanation. So we'll get into some of our differences with Noahide laws, and your show is Ask Dr. Brown. So I've got a bunch of questions and notes here to that we could get into some stuff. First, I wanted to ask, how familiar are you with my work? Have you seen any of my videos on Noahide laws?
I've seen some of your videos, but I'm not intimately familiar. I've been reading more, knowing that we're going to be on, and looking at some different links that you've put up. Mm-hmm. I've followed some of your tweets and the links from there, but I'm not intimately familiar. I want to be totally fair in saying that. So I know you put a lot of time and effort and energy and take this very seriously. But just to press the schedule, I haven't been able to listen to as much as I want. So I'm somewhat familiar, but feel free to, if there's something I'm saying and it shows lack of familiarity, with your permission, just interrupt me and fill me in, okay?
Okay, sure. And, I got to say, I admired this. On your website, askdrbrown.org, there's a link, and I thought this was awesome. I admire this. Reveals the real Messiah. You have down here a forum to schedule debates. So I like the spirit of debate, so we could talk about this stuff. It's definitely going to be valuable for everybody. And I'm happy to finally get you on.
Yeah, and let me just say this. I'm a follower of Jesus, which means since I came to faith in late 1971, I've been in opposition to the Jewish community. I've met with scores of rabbis. I have a 5-volume series on answering Jewish objections to Jesus, a whole volume explaining why I'm not a Talmudic Jew. I've been called by religious Jews public enemy number one because of the effect of our missions work to reach Jewish people. I believe Jewish people without Jesus are as lost as anyone else. So I just want that to be clear, that if we have differences on things, there may be a lot of areas where we have in common, but if we have some differences, I'm not coming as my goal is to defend Judaism or defend the Jewish community. I'm in constant conflict with especially the religious Jewish community and Chabad in particular, because of my views and because of contrasting their views of the Rebbe as Messiah with us preaching Jesus as Messiah. So in terms of my loyalties are with Jesus and with the entire scripture, the entire Bible. And if I think something is wrong or erroneous, then I'll address that honestly. But that's where my loyalties lie, and I think your viewers should know that.
Yeah, I wanted to start with mentioning that as well. As I have some empathy for you for how you're kind of stuck in the middle. You know, you're considered an idolater to a lot of your Jewish friends, and then a lot of the Christians, you know, see you as an outsider, a Jew, you know, stuff like that. So, do you think that gives you any bias at all to be more pro-Zionist, pro-Israel? The fact that you are Jewish and believe in Jesus?
It's possible. There was a time when I really rejected any Zionist position, you know, as a follower of Jesus. That as I was, you know, looking at a lot of church writings and things, I really questioned a lot of stuff. For me, I believe God brought the Jewish people back to the land in fulfillment of prophecy, but I believe that Jews are accountable like anybody else. If they do right, good. If they do wrong, we address it. But it's possible. I would also say that I've been sensitive to so-called Christian anti-Semitism. I say so-called in that, you know, there were Nazis that called themselves Christians and things like that. There were Polish Catholics that slaughtered Jews and called themselves Christians. Because of that, many Jews have a wrong understanding of who Jesus is. So I've been sensitive to that, but it's possible. There are biases. On the other hand, as someone that's grown up in the Jewish world, I'm very familiar with our issues. Mm-hmm. And when I've had conflict with the religious Jewish world, I've had some real conflict, and I've been really hated. And, you know, there have been people that I know that have been religious Jews that have come to faith that suffered a lot of abuse. So I've seen the good and the bad. But maybe there is some bias. It's possible.
I was watching some of your debates. One of them with a rabbi about if Jesus is the Messiah. Yeah, I can definitely see how you guys are at odds. But, you know, I wanted to say also that even on Noahide laws, which we're going to start debating right now, we actually do have a good bit of common ground and agree on a lot of the facts. We just kind of have a different conclusion. So why don't we start, for people, if there's anybody out there, I've covered it a lot, you've been doing videos on it, but could you just briefly explain what are the Noahide laws and then we can get into them?
Yeah. So according to Rabbinic Judaism, God gave 6 laws to Adam and then supplemented them to Noah. So they're called the 7 Noahide laws, based on texts in Genesis 2 and Genesis 9. To derive these laws from those texts, you have to read some things in, which the rabbis do. But the viewpoint is this, that God gave Israel the Torah with special responsibilities. So they have 613 commandments, but that the righteous of all nations have a place in the world to come. And if people will simply abide by these 7 so-called laws of Noah, then they'll be considered righteous. So they're the prohibition of idolatry, blasphemy, adultery, theft, murder, eating the flesh of a living animal, and then the call to establish courts of justice. Mm-hmm. So this is in theory that if a Gentile lives by these laws, then that Gentile will be considered righteous in God's sight. But for a Jew, they're required to keep the 613 commandments of the Torah. That would be, in a nutshell, what the 7 Noahide laws are. Mm-hmm.
And so some of the places where we agree, I've heard you say that they're not, the Noahide laws aren't biblical, but they're Talmudic and the interpretations derived by the rabbis, correct?
Yes. Mm-hmm. In other words, even if we agreed in theory mm-hmm. that the laws were good, obviously there's going to be discussion of what idolatry means. But even if we agreed that these 7 things are good, to derive them all from Genesis 2 and Genesis 9, that's done by rabbinic interpretation. It's not a straightforward reading of the text. And in fact, the rabbis want you to know that they're deriving it by rabbinic interpretation.
Yeah. And we also agree that there is a camp that believes that Christianity and Jesus and Trinitarians are idol worship.
Yes. To this day, there are sectors of Judaism that believe that Christianity, because of its Trinity worship, is idolatrous. The majority view in the Jewish world is that it's not idolatrous, but there remain sectors of Judaism and historically key Jewish leaders that said that it is idolatrous. They would all agree it's idolatrous for me. They would say, for me as a Jew, I'm an idol worshiper following Jesus. There's a disagreement in Judaism. The predominant view for some centuries has been that Christianity is not idolatry, but to this day, there are religious Jews that believe, according to the Noahide laws, Christianity is idolatry. Absolutely.
To this day, and also in the Talmud, and one of the most respected and famous rabbis, Maimonides.
Mm-hmm.
So
Yes, correct. Within the Talmud, of course, the question was the category of idolatry called avodah zarah was mainly just outright idol worship that the nations would do. Like if you go to India and Hinduism, and there's worship of statues and things like that. Then over a period of time, there was a discussion where Christianity fit. But Maimonides, you're exactly right. In the 12th century, in his Mishneh Torah, his Code of Jewish Law, which carries great authority to this day, did classify Christianity as idolatry. As I said, the dominant view over the recent centuries has been it's not, but absolutely. You could cite Talmudic texts and you could cite Maimonides that Christian worship of the Trinity is idolatrous for Gentiles. Yep.
And then the last point we agree on is that it is written, and at least the Orthodox used to believe that in the Messianic era, the punishment for those who don't uphold the 7 Noahide laws is decapitation.
Yes, that the theory would be that in the Messianic era, when peace is established on the earth and the whole world is worshiping God, that the Torah laws will be carried out with death penalty and the Noahide laws will be. So in other words, if a Jew did not observe the Sabbath, the Jew would be put to death. If a Gentile committed adultery, or a Jew committed adultery, they would be put to death. So in other words, there would be the enforcement of the law for Jew and Gentile with the death penalty. And the most it doesn't always mention decapitation, but yes, that's a large understanding. And there's certainly religious Jews to this day that expect in the Messianic era that's going to be the case. No question about that.
Right. Okay, so but before I start, give you the floor and let you explain why Christians. I asked you on Twitter, are you concerned at all by the Noahide laws, or should Christians? Is it a threat to Christians? And you said no. So why don't you explain? Because if they're Talmudic and the Talmud is anti-Gentile, anti-Jesus, isn't it inherently a threat? This doesn't. Noahide laws don't go in line with the Christian theology. So I don't see, you don't support Noahide laws. That's another point I'd like to make.
No, I support preaching Jesus to the nations. I don't support encouraging Gentiles to observe the Noahide laws. I encourage preaching Jesus, repentance and faith in him to all people. That's what I support and advocate.
So you reject the Talmud and you reject the Noahide laws, and that's what you advise other Christians to do.
Yeah. Well, of course, we reject Talmudic authority. Mm-hmm. There may be some nice teachings and insights and things, but of course, we reject Talmudic authority. We reject the Talmudic rejection of Jesus wholeheartedly, categorically. We reject the authority of the rabbis to dictate how Scripture should be interpreted categorically, wholeheartedly. As for rejecting the Noahide laws, I agree with all of them. In other words, that we shouldn't worship idols, that we shouldn't blaspheme. In other words, all those I find to be right. But the idea that God gave these laws, or the idea that this is what God requires from the nations, I completely reject that. Absolutely.
Okay, but you support the idea of no idol worshiper, but what if, say, there's some Hindu Americans, and they're hearing Noahide laws are in Congress signed by George Bush, and I got a video of a Chabad rabbi the other day in Congress trying to say, the Noahide laws. Do you see how they could be offended, or Christians could be worried that they might be considered idol worshipers? I mean, you agree that the punishment is decapitation, so it's not like we're making up conspiracies here or anything.
Oh, yeah. So let me just throw out, like, right up front why I have differences with you, and then we can flesh this out.
Sure.
Because I really appreciate you opening the floor to me, but I don't want to dominate the conversation.
I'll never let you dominate it.
Okay. All right. So for the sake of your viewers then who are not familiar with why I'm not concerned. All right. The first thing is we have the very real threat of Islam, which is decapitating people. Mm-hmm. We have the oppression, say, going on in communist China. We have grads from our ministry school serving in a lot of these dangerous parts of the world. One of our grads was killed by Al-Qaeda terrorists years ago in a dangerous Muslim country. So, we have this present threat right now of these very real things that are happening that I think we should focus on. That's number one. Number two, the Jews that are advocating that America recognize the Noahide laws and things like that, they are doing it embracing Christianity as a Noahide faith. For example, Rabbi Shimon Cohen, Cowan in Australia, who's a leading Chabad rabbi and maybe the best known advocate of this worldwide. In his view, Christianity, Judaism, and Islam are all Noahide monotheistic faiths. So the ones that are pushing this are saying that Christianity is not idolatrous, and the ones that are getting Congress to sign, I was just looking at a legal statement by the Lubavitcher Rebbe, the leader of Chabad that died in 1994, that Christianity for Gentiles is acceptable. It's not considered idol worship. So from their perspective, the ones who are pushing it, they're not viewing us as idolaters. That's the second thing. The third thing is...
Okay, well, before you move to the third, can I address that one?
Please.
Okay. Well, just because they're saying now it's okay, who's to say that in the Messianic era when Moshiach is here and he's the judge, you think that they're really going to allow Christians to still continue worshiping Jesus? I think that's a bit naive to think that. And of course they're going to say now, oh yeah, the temple's just for peace and Noahide laws. You're already Noahides, don't worry. But things can change and extremists tend to take over sometimes. So don't you think it's important to nip it in the bud before Noahide laws could become out of hand?
Got it. Okay, so I think here's the big rub, which was going to get me to the number 3. So this is perfect timing to jump in. And I'd love to hear your thinking on this. I don't see a scenario where in this age, Jews are going to have world dominion, world control, that the Muslim world, that communist China, that Russia, that they will all submit to Jewish rule, and then based on that, behead Christians. Christians could well be beheaded by an antichrist. Is an antichrist going to be a false Jewish Messiah? That's a whole other question. But if Judaism was true, and if there was going to be a literal Messiah that was not Jesus, you better believe Christians are going to be in trouble. Okay? Yeah. I just don't think that because Jesus is the Messiah, when he returns, that's the end of it. I just don't see this scenario ever playing out. So please help me understand something. All right? And again, I referenced something in a private email to you about conspiracy theories, and so I understand why you're raising that. And I know you're looking at this carefully. You're trying to dig. You're trying to understand. Mm-hmm. So I'm not going to use the word conspiracy theory because I really want to understand. What is the scenario?
I wouldn't let you use conspiracy because you said you haven't seen my videos yet, so you don't even know what's in there to call it a conspiracy.
Yeah, not extensively enough. Yeah. Fair enough. Yeah, that's why I wanted that said plainly at the beginning. But either way, I wouldn't. You have been generous enough to have me on the air with you in a very fair way. The last thing I'm going to do is insult you or your viewers. Okay, God forbid. And that's not my heart to do at all. But explain to me a scenario other than Judaism being true and us being wrong about Jesus. And other than that, and then there's a Jewish Messiah that's different than the one we're expecting, and he's going to enforce things. And people like me, I'm in big trouble. I'm in very big trouble because I'm a missionary telling Jews to believe in Jesus. I'm definitely in big trouble if that's the case.
You're in far more trouble than the Noahides.
Yeah, absolutely. Sure. I'm a chief sinner, especially because we've been effective in winning Jewish people to faith. But explain to me the scenario in which without a Jewish Messiah ruling over the world, that this could ever be enforced. That's why I haven't taken it seriously, because I don't see that scenario. So I'm all ears. I'll just sit back and listen if you could explain this to me.
Cool. Yeah, I'll definitely get into that info. And it's what I've been showing and documenting in my videos that I've done. They're up on my website. Another thing where we have common ground, where I heard you conceded or admitted or just acknowledged that there very likely could be a false one world religion. That seems to be part of the agenda. So it seems to me like that's what Noahides is. So that's why it's so concerning.
I understand. And that a false one world religion concerns me. With, say, the Vatican working together with Islam, working together with Judaism, the world ecumenical movement. If an antichrist figure was able to set up something like that, that would genuinely concern me. But not because of Noahide laws, because of a false one world religion and an antichrist ultimately wanting to kill Christians. But I think that antichrist would also end up killing a lot of Jews as well, as I understand scriptures, if that's accurate. But yeah, I share that concern with you and that's why I so resist any type of ecumenical movement.
Mm-hmm. Okay, so let me show you this. You say, how could this happen? You don't see any way that this could happen. I see it unfolding every day. For one, they're pushing this thing where it's any criticism of Israel is anti-Semitism, saying anti-Zionism is anti-Semitism. They're trying to push anti-Semitism laws all throughout the country. The definition, I don't know if you've seen it, it's at state.gov, and it's just ridiculous language that you can't accuse them of controlling anything, any societal institution. It says that you can't talk about them being racist. You can't say that they have loyalty to Israel. All of these things. I see this as a form of the no blasphemy 7 Noahide laws. They're trying to make it, you talk about this stuff online, everybody's getting purged from YouTube. They're working closely with the ADL, Jonathan Greenblatt, the CEO or director there. He wears the Kabbalah bracelet, and I've read about the supremacy in the Kabbalah and the Tree of Life, how they think Gentiles are on the animalistic lower level, and the ADL's working with all of Silicon Valley to do censorship, and they're like a branch of Israel. They have an office in Israel. They work closely with the government. So I see that happening. And then also with the push with Noahide laws, Chabad is incredibly influential in Russia, in the United States. Trump donated to Chabad. He got a Tree of Life award in 1983. Kushner is Chabad. He's arguably one of the most powerful men in the country right now as top advisor to Trump. So I see them with a lot of influence, media, banking, government. And I saw you kind of mocking that in one of your videos, saying that like Trump is controlled by the Jews. Would you acknowledge that Trump has AIPAC, Adelson, Netanyahu, Kushner?
I think, all right, first, I don't think Trump is controlled by anyone personally. I think he does his own thing. There's definitely a lot of Jewish influence. I see him more under the influence of evangelical Christians, some of whom I know that are in regular contact with him.
But they're Zionist. They're like a step away from being Noahides with how much they worship Israel.
Well, I wouldn't call it worshiping Israel. I'd call it recognizing that God keeps his promises. Even though Israel fails, that God keeps his promises. Not all of them are staunch Zionists. I think some of them certainly are. One that I'm thinking of is not a staunch Zionist.
Mike
but
Evans?
Either way, just to explain to me though, at what point then that Trump, who professes to reverence Christianity, I don't think he's a real Christian, but professes to reverence that, who has, Mike Pence and Mike Pompeo, all these guys around him, Ben Carson, who are Christians, all these evangelicals, that now he's going to pivot and say, okay, actually, all of you are going to get beheaded now. I mean, that's such a jump to me of anything that can be fathomable. It's one thing to say Jews have disproportionate influence here and there. And by the way, I am against laws that make it illegal to criticize Jews. I'm absolutely oppose those. I oppose lies about Jewish people and demonizing about Jewish people, but I absolutely stand for freedom of speech. And even if I hate the fact that people are being purged from YouTube. People that I don't like are getting purged from YouTube. I differ with that. I'm in the same trouble with these people. My videos get, attacked and things. So I'm dealing with some of these same forces that you are. But again, I don't mean to insult what you're saying, but how do you get to that jump now where suddenly there's a shift? It's like, okay, now actually we want you to know that under the Noahide laws, Christians should be beheaded, and now they're going to start beheading Trump's evangelical council and Mike Pompeo and Mike Pence. I just don't see that.
Well, I've never said that they're going to come out next week and start beheading Christians. This is not imminent. It's not inevitable, but it has been their goal since 70 AD, since their temple was destroyed. This is a question I wanted to ask you. So Zionism, the way I look at it, it's not just the ancestral homeland for the Jews to live in. I see it as 100% all about their prophecy. The reason that they had to have the state of Israel and Jerusalem and the Temple Mount are so important is because it fulfills their Zionist prophecy. They want to rebuild the temple, they want their Moshiach to come, and they want to rule the world according to their prophecies.
Right. So are you aware of what's called the three vows in the Talmud?
No, enlighten us.
Okay, so the vast majority of traditional Jews opposed the rebuilding of the modern state of Israel. And now there are many more that are sympathetic, but to this day there are hundreds of thousands of Jews who live in Israel who are anti-Zionist, among the religious Jewish community. So one of the three vows was that you never rebel against the country where you live. And this was obviously a lesson after rebelling against Rome and suffering two terrible wars, that you don't rebel against the country where you live. And another was that you don't try to come back to the land without the Messiah. Mm-hmm. So in the view of traditional Jews that hotly opposed the biggest Hasidic sect in the world then, or the most influential, Satmar, strongly opposed it. And the reason was they said that it's for the Messiah to do, mm-hmm. and that if Jews will make it happen on their own, they'll get in the way of the coming of the Messiah. It will incite more anti-Semitism worldwide, and that it will end up being a secular state, which is the very worst thing because it won't be Torah observant. So the evangelical Christians have been much bigger on the prophecy end, actually. Mm-hmm. So traditional Jews pray every year, next year in Jerusalem, but the view would be that the Messiah would do it by leading Jewish people into obedience to the Torah, then regathering them back to the land, rebuilding the temple, fighting the enemies of the Lord, and then establishing universal peace where all the world would come to worship God. And the Jewish people would be like the priestly nation worshiping God, and then the Gentiles would learn of the ways of God from the Jews. And yes, the Jews would have a leadership role, no question about it. But it's evangelical Christians who push the prophecy thing a lot more. For traditional Jews, there's been a lot of resistance to the modern state of Israel for these reasons. So I don't see it as this Jewish ambition. And look, like 70% of the nation of Israel is secular, and your average Israeli Jew doesn't even think about rebuilding of the temple. And the majority traditional view is don't do it. That's how we'll know the Messiah comes. So unless the scenario is that the Messiah, the Jewish Messiah, is actually going to be the Antichrist, and then he's going to rebuild the temple and bring in a false religion, and then Christians will be persecuted. I got no problem with that scenario. In other words, that could happen. There could be a Jewish Antichrist. I don't know who he'll be or what he'll be.
How could the Moshiach not be the Christian Antichrist? That's who sits in the temple. That's who tries to establish the world government. It's like the perfect description is Moshiach is the Antichrist.
It could be. Mm-hmm. There's some that have made a case for an Islamic Antichrist. Prophecy teachers for years argued he was European, mm-hmm. but others think it'll be a Jewish false Messiah. So if that's the concern, in other words, that the Antichrist will actually be a Jew, and that the world will be deceived by him, and that Christians will be slaughtered, then fine. That's a concern I would say could be. If the Antichrist is a Jew, that would be a totally valid concern.
That's the concern that I and my friends and my audience has, and you'd have to acknowledge, from the comments and the thumbs down and the views, like public opinion basically agrees that Noahide is a danger, is a concern, and we just want to expose it early on and not let a bunch of Christians be duped into being Noahides, which does seem to be their agenda.
Well, I 100% stand with you mm-hmm. that Christians should not be identified as Noahides. That I actually know of people who are former Christians who are apostates now that call themselves B'nai Noach. Mm-hmm. They just identify with the Noahide laws. They reject Jesus, and they follow the teachings of the rabbis. To me, they have completely disgraced the Lord and have tread on the blood of the Son of God who died for them and accepted something completely secondary. And I have no idea why anyone would do that. So I'm with you on that. Here's my concern, Adam, to be as candid as I can. Mm-hmm. When people hear this, they now look at Jewish people and think the Jews in general want to behead Christians. or that there's this agenda that these
I
guys
don't
have.
think so. I don't think anybody's saying Jews in general. We're talking about Chabad Lubavitch and the people that are actually pushing Noahide laws.
Right, but in their mind, this is all theory. In other words, all these laws are theory. When Maimonides was writing his Mishnah Torah in the 12th century, they had no community to live in. You know what I'm saying? They were persecuted, scattered people. They couldn't even enforce, even in Israel, the death penalty is not enforced by religious Jews. It's waiting for this era when they believe Messiah comes, in which case there'll be peace in the entire earth and the whole world worshiping one God. That's when they see these laws being enforced. So, I've interacted with Chabad for years, and we clash. I mean, constantly, we're in battle with each other.
Not when you debate Shmuley on if the New Testament is anti-Semitic.
Well, no, we agreed. Well, he believes it is. He believes it needs to be changed and edited, and that a lot of passages need to be removed.
You suggested that as well. You wrote that in your Times of Israel article. You support improved translations.
Translation, yeah. Don't you support improved translations of the Bible?
I don't think Christians want the Bible to be rewritten.
Not rewritten. Mm-hmm. No. The Hebrew and Greek texts, the New Testament written in Greek, as it is, word for word, letter for letter, that's the text. I bow down to it. That's the word of God. God forbid we alter it. But we need to translate. In other words, if you look at the best Greek dictionaries, they'll tell you that the word that we translate Jew sometimes means Judean and sometimes means Jewish leaders. So all I'm saying is just translate accurately and confident. Like in John 7, Jesus is afraid to go to Judea because he's afraid of the Judeans. Just translate accurately and confidently. But I'm glad you raised that. God forbid that you rewrite a syllable of God's word, that we tamper with a dot or a line of God's word. And the New Testament makes clear that there is Jewish responsibility in the death of Jesus. Not only Jewish responsibility, but that Jewish leadership rejected Jesus and gave him over to the Romans to be killed. And that is a large reason why Jerusalem was destroyed in the year 70. Judgment on the Jewish leaders for rejecting Jesus, the Messiah. So thanks for raising that, just to be clear.
Something else I forgot to mention is that it's not just the 7 laws of Noah. There's also sub-laws, and they're kind of always open to like more rabbinical interpretation. There's articles about Noahide communities in Brazil and the Philippines, and they're being oversaw by Chabad rabbis. And they say that their goal is 7 billion converts. They're open about that. And did you know that Netanyahu and the has endorsed the Noahide movement, and that it's affiliated with the Temple Institute as well?
Right, but bear in mind that his endorsing of it, so you would say he's going to change his position at some point. In other words, he would endorse it now, saying that Christianity, Islam, and Judaism are all Noahide faiths, and that they are all monotheistic faiths worshiping the same God. Of course, I differ with the idea that we all worship the same God. But you would have to say that they're saying it now, but at some point in the future, they're going to change that. That would be your view?
Well, I'm just putting myself in somebody's head. If they want to get the world to adopt these laws, they're not going to tell Christians, hey, adopt these laws, even though it's going to be off with your head if you continue to worship Jesus. They're going to say, oh, you're fine until it's the conditions, I believe it's in the Talmud, where they say, like, do this if you can get away with it. But if it'll cause a problem, or if you're not mighty enough to pull it off, then you don't do it. Correct?
Well, that I'd like to know the exact source you're talking about, but there is not Jewish teaching that would be the equivalent of Islam in terms of taqiyya and specific denial for religious purposes. But I look, all I can say is, because I've been in constant conflict with rabbis in the Jewish community for decades, when the Noahide laws thing has come up, it's come up in a very benign way. And that's always the way it's been, even with Chabad rabbis. So we're clashing, we're in conflict. They believe I'm doing destructive work. And I had a Chabad rabbi tell me at Stony Brook University years ago when I was talking to him that if it had been in the days of the Second Temple, that molten, burning lead would have been poured down my throat to kill me. That's what he thought of my work. And yet, when Noahide laws come up, it's always very benign. It's like, that's fine for the Goyim, it's fine for the Gentiles, but you're a Jew, you should be observing the Torah, etc. So
Well,
that's why I've reacted the way I have with such astonishment. But help me understand this. Yeah, go ahead. I'm sorry.
Well, that's kind of your anecdotal personal experience, but I've got numerous clips of rabbis online talking about the Noahide laws, saying incredibly extreme stuff, and I saw in one of your videos you're saying like it's a debate. It's a debate if idol worship, if Christianity is idol worship or not. Just the fact that it's a debate is enough cause for concern. Like, imagine if there was there was a bunch of Muslims that had influence in our government, like where Kushner's at, and they were debating if they should implement Noahide laws. Would it be a concern to you, even though it was just a debate? I'm sorry, I should have said Sharia law. I said Noahide.
Yeah.
Even though it's a debate, it's still a concern.
Yes. Okay. I fully understand that perspective. That's a great analogy. That's a very helpful analogy. Of course, look, where I hear of communities in America where they want to be governed by Sharia law, or where they have agreed to that in the UK, I know where that's going. So that's a very helpful analogy in terms of, from your viewpoint, they're parallel. From my viewpoint, they're not parallel, because this is legal theory and debate that the Talmud is full of, and that Jewish people have been engaged in for centuries, and that there's no thought of enforcing it because there's no power to enforce it or will to enforce it. That would only happen when Messiah is presently here. So the only possible scenario which this could happen is if there is a Jewish Antichrist at some point in the future, which to me, then again, that's the big issue. Not the Noahide laws, but a Jewish Antichrist that's going to have worship of him alone. That's going to be our battle. And as I understand Scripture, that's going to be the issue. That the Antichrist is going to demand complete allegiance and obedience to him alone, and those who won't bow to him will be put to death.
Well, who is cheerleading for Moshiach more than Chabad, and they're also the ones pushing Noahide laws. I wanted to ask you, do you support the rebuilding of the temple?
Do I support it? In what way? Am I behind it? Am I encouraging it?
There's a ton of Christians that are just saying, "Yeah, we got to rebuild the temple."
No, I'm not one. I'm not one of them. I believe it will be rebuilt, as I understand prophetic Scripture. As far as I can tell, it will be rebuilt. I believe it'll be part of a final deception of Israel, where they'll think that they're vindicated and God has fully backed them and backed the Sinai covenant. And that will be kind of I expect there to be heavy persecution of Jewish believers in Jesus in Israel. Some of my fellow Messianic Jews have been persecuted, and there have been threats. I expect that to get very heavy. I think I could very easily see, that just what we saw in the New Testament with people like Stephen being killed for their faith in Israel as Jewish believers in Jesus, or someone like me there, I see that as a very real possibility. So I believe it's going to happen prophetically, that the temple would be rebuilt, but I don't support it. I don't see it as a positive. I see it just as a final thing that's going to happen in terms of an end time deception before Jesus returns. And if there is a physical temple, then that's the one I'm looking forward to, the one that he builds. If there will be one, that's the one I'm looking forward to.
That's good to hear that you're not for the temple, because that's a lot of the stuff that I cover that I'm worried about. The people like I saw you were on Jim Baker about a year ago, and you were saying that Trump is moving the embassy to Jerusalem, and this is kind of a prophetic event. And like that guy, Jim Baker, is always talking about and having guests on about rebuilding the temple. They're trying to force all these prophecies to happen. And
yeah, it could be. I don't, I was on Jim's show, and that's the extent of my following things. But look, I'm on lots of shows. You've had me on your show, so that's going to make you look bad to some, Oh,
I'm sure. And you said you are concerned about Christians in Israel, and their enforcement could expand beyond Israel. It could happen in the United States as well. But I was thinking that how the Christian radio station was burned down in Israel pretty recently, and I think you had a run-in where people were in the street giving you a hard time as well. They're spitting on Christians, burning down the churches. I mean, it's like, I don't understand why all the Christians support Chabad support this animal sacrifice that's happening, supporting the real rebuilding of the temple. If they're for Jesus, where did Jesus ever talk about rebuilding the temple? And
yeah, I think
one more thing, modern Judaism is basically just like the Pharisees, right? Pharisees kind of morphed into modern Judaism.
Yeah, of course, the traditional Jews think that the New Testament picture of the Pharisees is very unfair. But yes, they would say that they are the heirs of the Pharisees, that the Pharisees then became the rabbis and the founders of rabbinic Judaism. And Adam, just real quick, what's your own religious affiliation?
I was raised Church of Christ, but as a journalist, I like to keep a neutral, ambiguous stance.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right. So I just didn't know if what I was going to say was going to offend you. So, but
no offense.
It's been rightly said that Judaism is no more the religion of the Old Testament than Catholicism is the religion of the New Testament. In other words, both of them have the Bible. So the Old Testament for Judaism, the whole Bible for Catholicism, but it's the Bible plus tradition. And if you go to a Roman Catholic service and you think, why are they doing this? And look at the calendar and views of the Pope and all that, the vast majority of it comes by way of Catholic tradition. A traditional Jew believes that on Mount Sinai, God gave Moses the written law and the oral law. And the oral law has been passed on through each generation. And that with the oral law, there is the interpretation of the written law. So, example, when the Bible says don't observe the Sabbath, and if you work on the Sabbath, you're put to death, then the rabbi said, well, where in the Bible does it say what it means to work on the Sabbath? You need the oral explanation that was given to Moses that's allegedly preserved in the Talmud. So, as I mentioned, my 5-volume series, Answering Jewish Objections to Jesus, I have a whole volume, volume 5, why I reject that Talmudic authority. But I just want to double back to one thing. When you mentioned that public opinion is against me on the Noahide laws, right? So, for example, when I've gone after Rick Wiles and True News and accused them of anti-Semitism, say my average video, we've got like 2,000 videos and almost 100,000 followers on YouTube. So I think you've got a lot more YouTube followers than me. But my average video gets like 95% thumbs up. When I went after Rick Wiles and True News, that has more thumbs down than thumbs up. And Noahide law is either more thumbs down than thumbs up or very close. But that to me just tells me that there's a lot of animosity against Jewish people and a lot of things being believed against them falsely.
No, it's not Jewish people. People disagreeing with you in the comments and in the thumbs isn't people hating on Jewish people. It's people, Christians disagreeing with your stance that Noahide laws should be no concern. And the fact that you're going after Christians who are anti-Zionist like True News or Ted Pike or E. Michael Jones, you're focusing all the attention on them, but I don't see you talking about these Jim Bakker and these Third Temple people who are essentially working with the Pharisees to rebuild the temple, to usher in the Moshiach. It just seems amazing that Christians support the Pharisees to rebuild the temple.
Yeah, so on that point, and by the way, look, all of us focus on different issues. You know, I could ask you why you don't focus on certain other things, but you have your interests, you have things that you feel are important. And the same with me. Because I've seen the effect of anti-Semitism among professing Christians and vile, ugly things. And by the way, I'm sure you get a lot of hate mail too, but the flood of Jew-hating stuff that comes my way, you know, when Hitler didn't do a good enough job, and you hook-nosed Zionist scum, calling me a secret Mossad agent or working with Chabad, and then the filthiest stuff, and they're saying it as Christians. So there is a lot of junk out there, and that's why I go after it. But without question, Adam, there is a lot of superficial excitement about Israel, about prophecy, that to me does not carry the heart and soul of God. We do Israel tours every year or two, and it's very impacting to go through places in the Bible where Jesus was, where Elijah called down fire from heaven, and to think of Jesus coming back here one day and what's going to happen in the future. It's very intense. And so it's a totally non-political tour. It's deeply spiritual. But I tell people, I want you to go back with a burden to pray for Jewish people to know Jesus. I want you to come back burdened for Israel. So yes, there are a lot of beautiful things and great things and excellent things, but my last desire is to exonerate Israel. Look, far and away, the most gay-friendly city in America, in the world, according to polls, is Tel Aviv. Far
Funny,
and away.
you almost said America, like Israel is a
Yeah.
state of a Freudian slip there, huh?
Yeah, but you confused Sharia with Noahide, so that was
Yeah.
your Freudian slip.
Well,
So we're even on
easy
that.
mistake to make.
Okay, right. Anyway, good comeback.
So here,
but there's a lot of Israeli women serving in the IDF can get free abortions. You have gay pride marches in the streets of Jerusalem. You have the ultra Orthodox. Some of them can be incredibly venomous towards Christians. And some of them have defaced churches and things like that. Now, the vast majority of the religious Jewish community is appalled by some of these acts. But yeah, you have extremists, no question about it. And when I was in Israel last year, I got arrested because I was harassed by this counter missionary from a group called Yad Lachim, and he started trouble. And the more he started trouble, I could have just walked away, but I decided he's not going to chase me out of here, so I'm going to preach. And then that got ultra-Orthodox Jews around me. And the Jesus they know is the version they know from the Talmud. So he's an idol worshiper that led Israel astray. And he's burning an excrement in hell in their view. And in their mind, there's a straight line from the New Testament to the Holocaust. So, that they're coming with their hostility. Of course, when I got arrested and the guy sat down with me, he says, fine, you didn't do anything. And just had me walk away with a big smile, But yeah, there are fanatics. There's no question. There are friends of ours, friends of friends in Israel where their son was blown up by a bomb from an ultra-Orthodox Jew a few years ago. Ami Ortiz miraculously survived. We have friends with another Messianic congregation that was firebombed years ago by religious Jewish fanatics. So I don't deny that or downplay that. So there is a superficial, sensationalistic excitement about the prophecy. Oh, the prophecies are all being fulfilled. Oh, have they found the red heifer yet? Oh, I'm not into any of that. I believe a lot of these things are going to happen, that they're prophesied, but let God bring them to pass. To me, moving the embassy to Jerusalem was important because any nation in the world where they set up their embassy, we recognize it. And to me, there was no valid reason not to move it. I took that as positive. But again, you're absolutely right. I'm in between. I'm in two different worlds, so I get hit from both sides on these issues.
Mm-hmm. Right. Okay. Do you think it's supremacist to say that Jews are God's chosen? Do you see how that's chosenness? I see that as a supremacist.
It can be taken that way. In the Jewish notion, it's taken as privilege. Some Jewish texts say that it shows God's grace because the Jews were the weakest of all people and the most inferior. So for God to choose them shows his grace. Most religious Jews take it as a sacred responsibility. There is no question that there is some Jewish pride that we are somehow, when I say we, a Jewish person would think they are somehow superior or that by being chosen by God to give light to the nations, that puts them on a higher level. The rabbis I've interacted with for years, and again, in the midst of conflict, and I've read extensively, got a massive rabbinic library, is that it's taken more of a sense of privilege and calling. And just like Christians believe that we are now the light of the world, which to us is a sense of privilege and calling, despite our shortcomings because of God's grace through Jesus. So a traditional Jew looks at it as the great privilege that he, his family, that they were entrusted with all the commandments of the Torah, and they feel it's their sacred responsibility to make God known to the nations. But that is a biblical concept. In other words, when you read through the Torah, God did say, I'm choosing you for a purpose, but it's not because you're better than anyone. In fact, you're a stiff-necked people, but I'm doing it because I loved Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob and made a covenantal promise. But for some, yeah, there's definitely a streak of Jewish superiority in secular Jews, in religious Jews, but it's certainly not always inherent in the concept of chosenness, and plenty of other Jews just see it as sacred responsibility.
Okay. I wanted to talk about, I saw you wrote a column for WorldNet Daily. Do you still do that?
Yeah, my columns are syndicated, so they're posted. I write like one column a week just for the stream, but otherwise all of my columns go up on a bunch of different sites.
Okay.
ChristianPost.com, WorldNet Daily, Charisma Media, Townhall.com. So political sites and Christian sites.
Okay. All right. Before we get there, actually, you can see the screen, right? We were talking about how I'm saying like they may not be 100% honest about what the Noahide laws are. This is from Chabad, telling the truth and when it is permissible to be less than honest. So this is the type of thing that I've read. I can't quote you the exact verse right now, but I've read this several times, and it's all about them when they are mighty. When they are mighty, they can really pull off everything. But until then, you cannot be permissible or not telling the truth. Don't have to give the full truth. I've also seen stuff about how Jews can kind of like trick Christians, that kind of
Got
thing.
it. And I just typed this in and looking at it. Let me just say this. It's been very helpful to hear your perspective, so I understand why you see things the way that you do. It's been very helpful, even if I still disagree. Honestly, it's been helpful to hear where you're coming from and how this could just be like Muslims. I mean, look, the common view with Islam. Someone once told me, a Protestant friend with Catholicism, that when it's in the minority, it's a lamb. When it's in the equality, it's a fox. When it's in the majority, it's a tiger. Perhaps you could say that with various groups,
Right, yeah.
You have to posture yourself as, God forbid that a loyal follower of the Lord would think like that. But yeah, so you posture yourself a certain way, and then, like Sharia law is fine. It's just for Muslims. It's no big deal. And then when you get to a place where you have a bit of a majority, okay, you do it or off with your head. So I understand what you're saying here. I can only say that having read sources firsthand about Noahide laws, even some of the ones that others have been saying, you got to read this, you got to look at this, the Divine Code, some other books, I've bought those, I've looked at those, and I keep doing it. I keep buying more and reading more, studying more to try to see where people are coming from, etc. But all the people that I know, and it's not a lot, but the Jews that I know that like are really devoted to pushing the Noahide laws, like a guy like Arthur Goldberg, for example, really devoted to doing it, I know him pretty decently. And his whole thing is that Christians, Muslims, Jews need to unite together to do this. You're saying the whole thing could be a deception based on these principles. So again, my experience and understanding of the sources is very different than yours, but I do understand what you're saying. And then you look at, the Mark Zuckerbergs of the world and the George Soroses of the world and Jewish power here and control here, and the dots can be connected in your mind. I understand where you're going with, despite my differences, I do understand what you're thinking.
Yeah, you should. I'll send you the link to one of my Noahide law videos, and you could see, because one of the things you said in your video is that you're open to debate. You want to hear where's the evidence for all this stuff, and I've gone over a bunch of it in my videos. I want to ask you about Edom. I've seen articles and I've read that Edom is basically it's Rome, it's the West, it's Christianity.
Yeah. Many times in the Talmud, the Edom can be code for Rome. Sometimes it's code for Christianity. Sometimes it's code for both. So it's a way of, one, not mentioning it by name, but two, mentioning it in a disparaging way as something secondary and something rejected. Yeah. So
I've also seen, I guess in the Jewish Encyclopedia or somewhere, it says that that Jews are Edom. But the reason I brought it up is because I've got clips of rabbis saying that Christianity, the United States, Rome is Edom, and that they have to fall in the end times. And that's why they're saying this refugee crisis is a good thing. It means Moshiach is coming. This is the Messianic era when Edom gets destroyed. It sounds like they have an open plan to destroy Christianity.
Yeah, well, certainly very, very traditional Jews look forward to the day when all Christians and all Muslims and all Hindus and atheists all worship the God of Israel and abandon what they believe is wrong. For example, there's a verse in Jeremiah 16 where the nations of the world at the end of the age will turn to God and say, we've inherited lies from our fathers. So in the view of Maimonides, that will be what Christians will say at the end, Muslims as well. According to Maimonides, Christianity has served the purpose of bringing the concept of Messiah to the world, and Islam has served the purpose of bringing the concept of keeping commandments and monotheism to the world, but that in the end, Christians and Muslims will repudiate their faith and say we've been in error and we now recognize the one true God and the Messiah. There's another Talmudic view in Tractate Sanhedrin that the whole world will become Christian before the end, that the whole world will descend in the view of the Talmud into spiritual darkness and apostasy, and then the end will come. But when it comes to the end times, there are 1,001 different views in Judaism because it's not law. Law is like what you have to do. The end times is something where there's speculation. But yeah, I would not doubt that there are many, many traditional rabbis that look forward to the day, just like I as a Christian look forward to the day that Islam will fall to the gospel, not by the sword, but by the truth. And I look forward to the day when Jesus will return and destroy his enemies, whoever they are. I look forward to that day. If you had, for example, ISIS about to kill Christians and Jesus returns, well, ISIS is going to get burned up. So I look forward to that day. The question is there, in your thinking, a way that that's going to happen first? If it's the Lord coming in the clouds of heaven with fire, we all get on our faces. No one's going to argue with that. But you're thinking that some system can be set up, that there are enough Jews in high places in the world that they could then have some kind of world influence? Because
they're using the Christian leaders. It's a great segue. I don't know if you've read this by Yitzhak Ginsburg, Kabbalah and Meditation for the Nations. He says all that about how you Gentiles have been given a false heritage, and the leaders, Christianity has a silver lining. It's idolatry, but it's good because at least they're looking for salvation in a Jew. It's just one Jew, Jesus, and not all the Jews, the nation of priests, which he wants us to be devoted servants and basically just worship the Jewish people and worship Israel is how he describes being a Noahide.
God, and listen, one other perspective, because I'm in constant conflict with the Jewish community, I do teach about the Jewish roots of the faith. I mean, that's just the truth about what the New Testament says. And I do combat what I believe are lies about the Jewish people historically, or that all Jews somehow are directly responsible for killing Jesus and, share some corporate worldwide responsibility. Things like that I'll oppose. But because I'm in constant conflict with the Jewish community, especially traditional rabbis, it's so hard for me to think of Christians like falling in love with Judaism. You know what I'm saying? It's like it's such a different world.
How is that hard to think? That's all I see. Here, I got a clip for you. Watch this. First clip. I've been preparing for days, Dr. Brown, for this. I've got a good clip for you here.
Okay.
All right. Have you seen this? This is when Netanyahu is secretly filmed at a West Bank settlement. And
I haven't seen it.
He says, the Arabs are currently focusing on a war of terror. They think it will break us. The main thing, first of all, is to hit them. So he's saying the U.S. will say, how come you're conquering again? You've never seen this? And he says,
no, not this particular clip. No, sir.
He says, the world won't say a thing. The world will say we're defending. Aren't you afraid of the world, Bibi? He says, aren't you afraid of the world, Bibi? Especially today with America. He says, I know what America is. America is something that can be easily moved in the right direction. Shoot, I just realized I haven't had this on the screen. You've been seeing it, but the audience doesn't. America is something that can be moved in the right direction. And then he says, sorry, they say they're for us, but it's like they won't get in our way. They won't get in our way. On the other hand, if we do something, then let's say 80% of America support us. It's absurd. And I know you've got some. I want to talk about. Oh, where are we here? Let me bring you back. I want to talk to you about the Charismatic movement a bunch, which I just learned about in the last yesterday, and I saw Morning Star Church had a video where it was like, since 1948, America has been blessed because we support Israel, and if you're cursed if you don't. Like with religion, America's lots of Christians, and they're all turning to be Zionists. That's how they're going to be able to pull this off. And with Netanyahu saying it's absurd with how much support they get.
Right, but the Christian Zionists are not going to say, okay, actually turn around and behead us now. The tens of millions of Christian Zionists are and the Christian leaders in America are not going to say that. I mean,
they'll be Noahides first. They'll be converted to be Noahides. They're going to be there's a agenda right now to push that the Jews actually didn't kill Jesus, and they're pushing that you can't use the word Pharisees anywhere. Like this is an incremental thing. They're relentless. They're not going to give up with the temple and their end times because they need to have the temple. They need to declare the Moshiach in their minds to prove that Jesus wasn't the Messiah. So I don't think you should underestimate their passion for this.
Let me ask you this, though. Do you think it means nothing that for almost 50 years I've had constant, candid interaction with rabbis and Jewish leaders, and that their views on how the Messianic era is going to come to pass are completely different than anything you're saying? Are you just going to discount all of that as anecdotal and of no value? Almost 50 years in many, 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 many hours and a totally candid conversation, because the view is that it'll be a world leader that brings about world peace through teaching and through influence, and that with that established, then is proven to be the Messiah, as opposed to, and look, your average religious Jew, Jesus is not in their thoughts. The idea they have to prove he wasn't the Messiah, that's not they completely reject him, and they just believe that those that follow him are in deep and serious error and deception. They're longing for Messiah to come because they want to see the day in their mind when the rule of God is on the earth, when the whole world worships the God of Israel, when there's, Isaiah 11, no war, no attack, no hatred, that all the nations come streaming to Jerusalem and beat their swords into plowshares. There's no more war. That's what they're longing for and looking forward to, as opposed to, we've got to do this to set up our kingdom and to bring dominion. You may be reading that here and there, but, I've got tons of sources and things I've read over the years. The praying for the coming of the Messiah and the weeping for the coming of the Messiah is for God's rule to be established on the earth where the whole world worships him, and you have some of the prophecies of Scripture fulfilled. But just coming back to this, so do I hotly, strongly, passionately, adamantly, categorically, unequivocally oppose Christians converting to Noahide followers? Of course. So that, again, is part of your scenario, that hundreds of millions of Christians will convert to or tens of millions of influential Christian leaders will renounce Jesus and become Noahide followers, and they will be the ones who will then be enforcing this. That's part of your scenario, I guess.
Well, there's going to be some incremental steps before that actually happens. I'm not saying that all the Christian leaders are going to turn and saying, okay, everybody, no more Jesus or you're decapitated. It's like I said, it's in the Messianic era. It's in the future, but this is what their objectives are, which is why I see it as a concern now. And they sell the Jewish utopia, which I covered in, I don't know if you've read this one, Jewish Utopia. Oh, wow, how about that? Synchronicity. We didn't plan that.
No, we didn't plan it.
So they sell it that it's a temple for everyone, and it's peace, and there's no more war. But really, you may have, like Maimonides says, you may have a place in the world to come if you keep the Noahide laws, which the way they interpret it is no Jesus, and you have to worship Israel. You have to be the devoted servants, helping them with the temple, and then acknowledging the Moshiach is the other part of it.
Right, but not worshiping Israel. If people use that language, it's negative language. Look, I sent some clips to Orthodox rabbis, very learned guys that I'm in constant battle with, some of the clips with some extreme statements, Noahide statements or beheading statements. And I sent them to some very learned rabbis that are well established in the religious community. And they said, you got nutcases everywhere that make us all look bad. Mm-hmm. And, you know, I know these guys and I knew that they would react like that. But the idea is, by the way, the Messianic era is not the world to come. Okay, that's something after the Messianic era. That's like eternity, that's heaven. So who enters the Messianic era? It's everyone that's living when the Messiah is revealed according to Judaism, that those people then enter the Messianic era, and that's the time then where they believe that all these prophecies of universal peace will be fulfilled, that there won't be any more animosity, that the Jewish people as a nation will worship the God of Israel, and those who don't, they would be the first ones judged. In other words, in traditional Judaism in the Messianic era, if a Jew decided not to observe the Torah, they'd be put to death for that. If a Jew decided not to observe the Sabbath, they'd be put to death because the Messiah is going to rule with a rod of iron. So that's objectionable to the vast majority of Jews worldwide that are not religious. You know, 80, 90% of Jews worldwide are not Orthodox Jews. And in point of fact, evangelical Christians in Israel are stronger supporters of Israel than American Jews. Many American Jews are upset with the treatment of the Palestinians and are not that strong supporters of it. You know, they support Israel, but not the same way many evangelical Christians do. Many of them are very critical of modern Israel. But
my critiques of the Christian Zionists are just about as strong as, similar to how the Orthodox Jews are more upset with you than with Gentiles. I'm more upset with Christian Zionists sometimes than with, some of these Chabad people or people who I see are up to no good. Here's a question. Do you think that Christian Zionists that want to rebuild the temple so that the Antichrist comes and Jesus comes and defeats him, do you think those Christian Zionists are so-called anti-Semitic?
Why would they be anti-Semitic?
Well, because they're only helping the Jews build the temple so that Jesus will come and either convert them or kill them, correct?
Yeah, there is, okay, in terms of larger concerns about anti-Semitism, demonizing the Jewish people as a whole, dehumanizing the Jewish people as a whole, spreading lies about the nation as a whole. No, absolutely not. I would not see them as anti-Semitic. However, there are Christian Zionists, some, who are praying for their Jewish people to return to the land, but then they believe that the rapture will take place, that Christians will be taken off the earth, and that the Jews will then be slaughtered, that 2/3 will be slaughtered by the Antichrist in the land of Israel. And many have said that that is hardly a Jewish-loving position to say we're praying for you all to go back to the land so that the prophecies can be fulfilled and 2/3 of you will get slaughtered. At the very least, that's a very superficial love for Israel. Mm-hmm. If that's what you believe, you should be mourning and praying and wailing and warning, as opposed to all excited about the prophecies being fulfilled.
Right. And, okay, so before we get into the Charismatic movement, because this was new to me going over this yesterday, I wanted to ask you about circumcision, which I know is a little kind of an awkward question, but, you are the theologian, so I wanted to ask, what is your take as a Messianic Jew on circumcision?
It does nothing for someone's salvation. What Paul says in 1 Corinthians 7 and Galatians 6 is circumcision is nothing. What matters is keeping the commandments of God. So as far as salvation, forgiveness of sins, right relationship with God through Jesus, circumcision is of no value. Paul also writes in 1 Corinthians 7, if you were called, meaning called to salvation, circumcised, don't become uncircumcised. If you were called uncircumcised, don't become circumcised. So we know that Paul has Timothy circumcised. His mother was a Jew, his father was a Gentile, and he wasn't circumcised at birth. And for the Jewish mission Paul was doing, he had Timothy circumcised, but he wouldn't let Titus be circumcised because he was a Gentile. So aside from the medical procedure, which we're not talking about, we're talking about doing this in a spiritual way. Mm-hmm. Many Messianic Jews that I know, as continuing the Abrahamic covenant, because God gave this to Abraham in Genesis 17 before the Sinai covenant, they will circumcise their sons and have a ceremony for doing it in connection with being Jews. And as Paul wrote, if you're called circumcised, don't become uncircumcised. So it's a way of saying that we're still part of our people, even though we've been rejected for our faith in Jesus. We're still showing solidarity with our forefather Abraham. So that's great, that's fine, but it doesn't make anyone more or less spiritual, and it doesn't forgive any sins.
So I just was reminded of another question I have. I've noticed that you don't call yourself a Christian. You prefer to say Jewish believer in Jesus. Is that correct?
I mean, I referred to myself as a Christian once during the show, and as I minister around the world, many people know me as a Christian. I'm known as a Christian commentator, but the word has changed from its original New Testament meaning. Its original New Testament meaning, it only occurs 3 times in the New Testament, Acts 11, Acts 26, and 1 Peter 4. And it didn't mean a follower of another religion. What it meant was it was apparently a mocking term that the communities gave when they saw these Jews and Gentiles following this guy called Christos. They didn't even know what it meant. So it would be like calling one of your followers a greenite or one of my followers a brownite. It was an insulting term, but over the years, the idea was that if you were a Christian, that you were no longer a Jew, that if you were a Christian, that you renounced any heritage or any connection to the forefathers or anything like that. So in order to explain, no, I'm still a Jew, but I'm a Jew who follows Jesus. My identity is in him. We often refer to ourselves as Messianic Jews because Jewish Christian can be an oxymoron. But if being identified with Jesus, if I say I'm a Christian, meaning I am a believer that Jesus is the only Savior, that he died for our sins, rose from the dead, and is coming again, and there's no salvation outside of him, and that the New Testament, along with the Old Testament, is God's word. Count me in. I am 1,000% a Christian and stand with the Christian faith. Just want it to be rightly understood. And for outreach purposes, terminology matters. Words matter.
Okay. So as a Jewish Christian, hypothetically, I'm not sure, I don't want to talk about your family, but if you did have a boy, would you decide to continue the tradition of circumcision?
Yeah, we had 2 daughters, and then we have 2 grandsons. They were just circumcised medically. But I would do it as part of the solidarity, going back to the covenant with Abraham, and in keeping with what Paul said in 1 Corinthians 7, that if that's where you started, then continue in that way. But fully understanding it guarantees nothing, fully understanding that it doesn't bring salvation or right relationship with God, that in and of itself, it doesn't do anything, but it is simply a token and a sign of our connection to our people. Okay.
And I'm sure you condemn the moils that still do the sucking and stuff. That probably goes without saying, I'm sure.
Yeah, I mean, I don't understand why there's such devotion to it. There seems to be dangerous health issues with it. I haven't focused on the debate intensely, but why it's held to. There's absolutely nothing in the Bible calling for it, commanding it. So I really don't understand why it's such a sacred thing and why people fight over it, especially with the inherent health risks.
Right. Well, I believe there's health risks just to normal circumcision as well, but we don't have to open up that rabbit hole.
No, we won't go there.
Yeah. Okay. So I want to talk about the Charismatic movement, also Pentecostal, which this is the first denomination that you got in back when you were a rocker?
Yeah. So when I came to faith in 1971, I was a heroin shooting, LSD using, long-haired hippie rock drummer, and was born again at the age of 16. And it was in the context of a little Italian Pentecostal church. So Pentecostal movement is earlier than the Charismatic movement, but broadly speaking, Charismatic movement includes Pentecostalism. So yeah, I came to faith in what we would call a Charismatic church.
Okay, and for people that don't know, what are the way I saw it, Charismatic church seemed like there was 2 big differences, and that is speaking in tongues and faith healing. Is that an accurate summary?
More specifically, in the New Testament, there were various gifts called the charismatic gifts, like speaking in tongues or prophecy or gifts of healing or things like that. And the viewpoint is that these things continue until today, that the New Testament indicates that these will be here until Jesus returns. and that through parts of church history, the church got away from these things, but that this should be normative in the life of a Christian, the gifts and power of the Spirit for today. And like anything else, you have abuses, you have the abusive televangelist, and fraudulent fundraising and fraudulent healers. But again, with anything, you're going to have counterfeit and the real. Mm-hmm. So, yes, there was a season when I was working on my PhD in Semitic languages in the late 70s, early 80s, where I really questioned a lot of this biblically, and I challenged a lot of my foundations. But studying the Word, I was even more convinced that these things remain for this day. And by God's grace, I've seen a lot of amazing things happen over the years in America and around the world.
So back like in the 70s when you first came to the church, it was Pentecostal. How long before you were speaking in tongues? And is this the speaking in tongues where you're just like it could be interpreted, somebody could hear the language and be able to translate it? Or is this just kind of like freestyle gibberish that only God can comprehend?
Well, there are instances, plenty of instances where people speak a foreign language and don't know it. And, I've known those to happen. They've happened with friends of mine. But it's not just because someone doesn't understand it doesn't mean it's gibberish. In other words, if I just started speaking a language here that no one knew, it might sound strange to them, but it doesn't mean it's not a real language. If it was freestyle gibberish, you could just make it up right now and just go blah, 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 or whatever, or scat singing and jazz, and think you're speaking in tongues. But December 17th of 71, it was when I really deeply encountered the Lord and said, I'll never put a needle in my arm again, and was free from that night on. 5 weeks later, January 24th of 72, at a prayer meeting, was the first time I began to speak in tongues. And as I was praying and worshiping, I just began to feel something building up in me, a new expression, new language. And as I began to speak it, it began to flow. And, I could speak in tongues for hours. I could be reading a book. I could be writing a book. I could be using my mind in different ways while I'm speaking. There's something cognitively different happening.
You only do this privately, right?
Yeah, the public use would be if there's interpretation. In other words, that you speak and someone that has the gift of interpretation according to the Bible, that they interpret. Otherwise, it's for private use, or it's for use only among believers. It's not for a public meeting where non-believers can come in and I'm getting up behind the microphone and speaking in tongues for 10 minutes. That New Testament would say that's out of order. That doesn't help the people because they don't understand what you're saying.
Interesting. So how often do you still speak in tongues? Is it a everyday thing? Sure.
Daily as I pray. Then I'll pray in English with my understanding. Yeah, this is a bit of a switch from the Noahide discussion, but I'm happy to answer the questions. I pray in tongues normally on a daily basis. Sure.
Yeah. If I were to ask you, I would imagine you wouldn't want to do it publicly. There's 2,700 people watching.
Is that a good turnout for you, or is that average?
It is. No, it's a good turnout. They're all here for you.
Well, that's tremendous. Here, so let me just say no. So I wouldn't speak in tongues as a show or do it here, but
I might be able to translate.
There are enough instances of people speaking in tongues and YouTube videos that people can watch. But let me just say two things. And again, I really appreciate you having me on, and I appreciate the candor with which we can speak. So the first thing I want to say is this: people may differ with me, but I'm not hiding anything. In other words, I'm telling you things as I understand them. If I saw things the same way you did, I'd shout along with you. Okay, so I'm nobody's agent. I get in trouble for my stands day and night. I had no clue when I first addressed the Noahide thing on the air that was directly offending you and Stephen Ben Noon and others that were listening to you. I had no clue. In other words, I wasn't going out of my way to mock you. But bottom line, even if people differ with me, they differ based on the fact that I sincerely believe what I'm telling you. You can think I'm crazy or stupid, but I'm telling it like it is. I have no agenda. I'm not supported by anybody except Christians that believe in our ministry and help us and pray for us. The second thing is, I know that you say that when you come against the Noahide laws and expose them, that it's not anti-Semitic or it doesn't stir anti-Semitism. But if you look at comments to your YouTube videos, and I haven't watched this one looked at it today. But I imagine there's going to be a lot of Jew hatred expressed in those comments. I just wonder how, if you don't mind me asking you this question, because it's your show, how do you feel about that? That it seems to stir up a lot of anti-Semitic, just general Jew-hating sentiments.
Well, I think just starting the conversation at their Jew hating isn't the right place to start. I think these people are upset with all of the anti-Gentile, anti-America, anti-Christian stuff that they've been seeing, and that's their reaction to that. And of course, online comments, there's going to be a lot of garbage, a lot of crazy people. You know, there might be more videos online saying that I'm a secret Mossad agent than you. So, you know, I get a lot of crap too, and I'm not even Jewish. So,
I'm sure you do. Okay.
Right.
All right. I appreciate your perspective. Thanks for letting me ask you.
Yeah. And obviously there are some people that are just, I mean, it's very rare that people's comments are based on just some, you know, some hate that just comes from the inside. It's stuff that they've learned that they're upset about, and just to dismiss it as hate, you know, hate speech. I'm sure you don't go along with the communist hate speech type of shutdown, but
God forbid. That's why, you know, I stand with Jordan Peterson against, you know, the trans activism, and you have to call Bruce Jenner she, you know, or if you dead name someone, you're going to get banned from Twitter. I get in trouble for that all the time. But to be clear, I was not making a blanket statement that everyone making a comment is a Jew hater or is simply blindly hating Jews. And let's just say fair enough that you're not responsible for all your YouTube comments.
I block and take down as many comments as I see that are like over the line. I definitely do that too. I don't get them all, but I do try to keep it clean and respectful and not over incendiary or inflammatory or anything like that.
If you don't mind, a personal question, not about you, but about me. In your heart, I want you to be totally honest with me. Do you think that I'm some con artist secretly trying to support this Noahide thing and pull the wool over people's eyes? Or do you believe at face value what I'm telling you is this is sincerely what I understand to be true?
I had some suspicions that maybe you weren't being sincere and you were like a fake Christian that was here to kind of, you know, minimize the Noahide laws and to be pro-Zionist. But doing more research into your debates, I think that you are sincere and you speak what's on your mind.
Okay, great. So again, you can think I'm wrong or misinformed or naive. I have no problem with that. But I appreciate that because what you see is what you get with me. And again, even in the midst of our differences, because I haven't gone through all your stuff, I very much understand where you're coming from, much more, which is very helpful to me and helps me to respond to people with better understanding of where they might be coming from. So this has been very helpful for me as well. Just want to be on the record for saying that.
I think it's helpful for a lot of the audience too, because they see that you kind of do have some common ground and concede and see some of the risks that my audience is worried about.
Yeah, again, I don't share the worry, but I do understand where it's coming from. And if your concerns, and look, and again, we do share a lot of concerns, and we do have a lot of common ground as well. So that's always good to build on. And of course, I'll get the haters that I was on your show. You'll get the haters that I was on. But we have to have these conversations, man. If we don't, we just demonize each other and believe falsehoods about each other. So let's put the evidence on the table. Let's listen to each other, influence each other as best as we can, and then we inform our audiences accordingly. That's the best any of us can do.
Okay, one more thing about the charismatic movement, and this is something that I found a little disturbing, and that is these faith healers. And I saw in one of your videos that you were like that you wanted to distance yourself from the speaking in tongues a little bit and distance yourself from the faith healers because you're more scholarly, and that's kind of, people think it is like quacky. But this guy Todd Bentley, it seems like such a charlatan con man. And I want to know, how did you get appointed to oversee his scandal?
Yeah, that's okay. Number one, Todd Bentley is absolutely not representative of the charismatic movement. you will find very, very, very few major charismatic leaders who support his ministry today. That's the first thing. I have been publicly on record against his ministry for over a decade.
But isn't that just because of his affair? It seems like your problem is more with his affair and not his, the Morning Star Church and Rick Joyner and all of this. They're raising money, preying on the desperate and the sick, and they're exploiting them and giving them false hope. And I think it's just disgusting. These faith healers that go, and they go into convulsions and they say, you're healed, and then they raise money. I think instead of going after true news and people as anti-Semites, you should be condemning those type of people and not, friends in the same circles. And, I hope that the investigation finds that, in fact, I think the investigation should be over. Who cares what he did with his wife? He should be disqualified from being anywhere near a church with this. I mean, it's black magic sorcery at best, and at worst, he's a charlatan con man, and he's literally a convict.
Right. So let me say a few things. Because of the role I have, everyone knows that I opposed this ministry for years, and I've had major differences with alleged third heaven visits and revelation he's received, etc. But I haven't followed his ministry. I rejected it years ago. I haven't followed it. I haven't been a supporter of it in any way. When I'm asked publicly about it, I said I don't stand with this ministry. So I haven't followed it to see what else someone else might say is wrong. What happened is because I've written whole books. When you say I shouldn't go after your network, I don't think I have a single video where I play clips from you and differ with you, right?
Not me. Not me.
Right. I have, and again, when I answered the Noahide law question the way I did, I didn't even know. I know you have a big following. Okay, your viewing audience right now is a lot bigger than I get for my daily radio show. All right, a lot bigger. So there's a great audience. But I didn't know you existed. I don't mean that in any insulting way. I'm sure that you have a good following.
I wasn't aware of you at that point either.
Okay, got it. So it's a big world. I didn't know who Stephen Ben Noon was. I didn't know any of it. So I had no clue that I had just stirred up a hornet's nest with my answer, and that it was taken as a direct slap in your face and slap in Steve's face and John's face.
I don't think we took it like that. We just thought whoa, why is this guy trying to out here saying that there's nothing to worry about it? Everybody thought that was suspicious.
Got it. And again, from my viewpoint, it's like, what is everyone talking about? Because I've known about these. I didn't know about them growing up because I wasn't religious enough. But for decades, I've heard about it. It was the most benign thing, So anyway, but we've been through that ground. But I've written whole books on issues in the charismatic movement, playing with holy fire, whatever happened to the power of God. So whole books addressing errors and abuses. And I pray for sick people to be healed. And I have friends with gifts of healing that see miracles happen, and none of them exploit people. None of them do this in a manipulative way for money. And all of them have a broken heart for those who aren't healed and carry a burden for those who aren't healed. And will never, ever say to a sick person, you're sick because you don't have enough faith. They would never, ever say that. So you have these caricatures, these abuses, these people who have been corrupt, and some of them have ended up in jail for their corruption.
Yeah.
And I'm glad that that's happened. I grieve because it makes the church look bad or charismatic movement look bad. But I've addressed these. And to me, it's not a matter of being more scholarly. I tell you, I speak in tongues every day. I gladly pray for the sick. But anything that is manipulative to use a gift of God to generate money, especially to generate money for personal interest, is profoundly evil in God's sight. But what happened with the Todd Bentley thing, someone published a list of scores of allegations against Todd Bentley, immoral behavior, drunkenness, sexting, things like that. It exploded online, became this, who said it's this gossip thing, and the fellow who posted it meant well. In other words, he felt this has to get out. There's all this corruption. He felt no leaders were listening to him. That's how he had to do it. So people began to come to me and said, Dr. Brown, you're respected in the charismatic movement. You got tough skin. Why don't you oversee this? I said, I can't, because I've already come against his ministry. I said, so what we did is we appointed 5 people to serve as like judges, to review the evidence, whether Todd Bentley participates with us or not. He said he's out of the process. That's his business. We hired an investigator who is just about, in fact, later this week, I'm issuing another statement, just about finished investigating the charges. We'll present the evidence to the panel, and then the panel will simply say, we do not believe he should be in ministry for XYZ reasons, or he's being falsely accused. And my role is just to oversee that it happens fairly. Mm-hmm. So I can't be one of the judges because I made judgment years ago. But just for your own understanding, Todd Bentley is not representative of the charismatic movement. His teaching, his style of ministry, the bad reports associated with him over the years, he is not representative of the larger charismatic movement, which is maybe about 600 million people worldwide, and is some of the finest, most devoted Christians that I know on the planet. People working with the poor, people fighting human trafficking, people building hospitals, people starting schools in unreached areas, doing a lot of
Dr.
people.
Brown, how common in the charismatic movement is this the faith healer preacher where it's like, you know, people are shaking and healing the cripples and stuff? Is this a common thing? Because it's not Todd Bentley that I'm worried about or his scandal. It's any of the preachers who claim that they have the power of God to heal people and are raising money on that promise, essentially. That's where I see a problem.
That would be a massive problem. No,
and it is, right? That this occurs a lot. I've seen in one of your interviews you talked about a lot of these charlatans who are doing this.
Yeah, but that's fringe. That the people that pray for the sick do that as part of their ministry. In other words, if only God heals, no one can make it happen. No one has the ability to snap a finger and make it happen. Only God heals. And even when we pray for the sick, some are healed and others are not. And we understand that. But sickness is a terrible thing. And if you could pray for someone that was dying of cancer and they were healed, that's a beautiful thing. But I don't know anyone with major ministries that do this, that does it to raise money. Mm-hmm. What they do is they raise money to reach people. They raise money to go overseas and preach and serve because it takes money to do that. But the idea of pay me, and if you pay me, I'll prophesy to you or I'll heal you, that's completely corrupt. That's of the devil. That is one of the foulest things on the planet, but it's absolutely marginal. And look, whether someone shakes or not, I have no problem. God's very powerful, you know. If the wind can shake you, God's presence can shake you.
I watched this documentary on, I think, Lakeview or Todd Bentley's church. It's a lot of it is so ridiculous. These people are just acting. They want it so hard. They're so desperate for some type of miracle that they go along with these things.
Yeah, I mean, if you want to read some stuff from people that are right on the front lines, praying for the sick and documenting it. You know, one of my friends wrote his doctoral dissertation on prayer for people with metal implants and what the results were. There are tests published in peer-reviewed journals where people who were blind or deaf were prayed for, and then their hearing and seeing was measured before and after. So I'll send you a couple of links from some things that you'll find interesting as a journalist. In fact, one book in particular by a journalist that I think you'll find really interesting because he presents both viewpoints. He starts with interviewing an atheist and so on. But just for your information, if you're new to this, the Todd Bentley phenomenon is a complete outlier, absolutely fringe in terms of the norm of what's out there. You still might be uncomfortable in a charismatic service or where we're praying for people and they're shaking or things like that. But what we care about is people's lives being changed. In other words, the shaking, the falling is completely secondary. If you're sick, we want to see you healed. If you're bound by pornography or drug addiction, we want to see you set free. That's the goal. Shaking, falling, that's all secondary. But raising money off of it is a completely corrupt, totally ugly practice. And I work with a lot of the top leaders in the world. Not a one of them would go anywhere near that with a 10-foot pole.
Good. I'm glad to hear you condemn those snake oil salesmen and con men that are out there preying on the desperate and making victims of sick and weak people. Something else that I saw that came up, this will probably be an easy answer, but this guy Rick Joyner, who's associated with him, I don't know if he's one of your mutual friends, he says he's a Knights of Malta and his church is... I've already been suspicious of John Hagee being a Freemason because he's got the Cornerstone Church, and you know about the Cornerstone ceremony is a Freemasonic thing. Just like I got.
Well, you know, it's in the Bible that Jesus is the cornerstone.
That too, and
So
that's the other question is it's Morning Star Church, and I looked up Morning Star in the Bible, and that's Jesus or Lucifer. So my question is, are you a Freemason, and do you know any Freemasons?
No, that's not my back. No, I'm not a Freemason.
You don't know any Freemasons?
If they're none of my colleagues are Freemasons. I mean, it's so outside of my world, outside of any interaction I've ever had. I know the thing about Rick. I've heard these Knights of the Island of Malta or something like that.
Malta, yeah. So
Rick and I have very serious differences about Todd Bentley, and right now we're in the midst of those serious differences. He and I at present, we've been friends in mutual areas of that where we have harmony and share certain views. Over Todd, we've had a very serious clash and difference, whether it goes back 10 years or more. But I never asked him about this night thing, whatever it is. I guess I should at some point. But Freemason, no, I don't know any Freemasons. I imagine they're, I don't know. I don't know any serious Christian that's a Freemason, because as far as I understand, it's totally contradictory.
Yes.
Freemason, you know, so all the leaders I work with, none of them are Freemasons, but I don't know many that came out of Masonry. I know a few over the years that used to be Masons and told me about the secret rites and practices, but this is something I'm no experience in. As for Morning Star, it's a deception where Satan wants to claim that he's the bright morning star, Hillel ben Shachar, the shining one, son of the dawn, in Isaiah 14. But Jesus is the only one associated as Morning Star. You know, that's the purpose of a name like that, or cornerstone, that Jesus is the chief cornerstone. And I would honestly say that track, like associating that with Masonry or Morning Star with Lucifer, that's a rabbit trail to avoid. But the Knights of the Island of Malta thing, whatever with Rick, I got to ask him about it, because it is a peculiar thing. People have asked me, and I just never bothered to ask him. But that's not Masons, right? That's a separate thing?
Yeah, I believe that's a separate thing. So I agree with you that Freemasonry and Christianity can't go together, don't jive. Look at this from 1912. Solomon's Temple, scheme of Freemasons and opinions of Jews on rebuilding the temple. And, the Freemasonry is based on Kabbalah. Actually, the 21st degree is called a Noahide. And they're all about rebuilding the temple as well. So it seems like there's some type of Freemasonic Jewish conspiracy kind of working towards the same goal of having this Zionist New World Order. The way I look at it.
I know very, very little about Freemasons and Masonry. People have told me over the years I need to learn more about it, and it's really important, and look at the history of America, and look at the architecture in Washington, D.C., and look at our currency, our bills and things like that. But honestly, I know very, very little. It's not useful for me to comment, because I know very, very little about it, except that I have zero connection. I don't even, if I wanted to ask about Masonry, I'd have to go to websites, because I don't know anyone that's a close friend of mine that was a Mason. It's just, is it parts of America more that people are like into it more in certain cultures?
Because I don't know. I don't personally know any either, but
okay.
But
can I ask you a question though?
Sure.
Are you a Mason?
No. I'm accused of being a Mason. I've been accused before, but no, I'm not.
Okay. I mean, I was just joking and asked that.
I'll give you the secret handshake later. Just kidding.
Okay, I do know it's the Hamas charter that Masons are controlled by the Jews in Israel. That's in the Hamas charter. But
well,
I don't.
There's the symbolism that Rothschild built the Supreme Court in Israel, and they have the pyramid there with the all-seeing eye that's similar to On Our Money.
Similar to DC.
Yeah, there's also B'nai B'rith is kind of loosely associated with it, a secret society as well. And look up Freemasonry in Israel. Tex Mars did a good documentary on that years ago, and I think you'd be interested in some of my videos. You should watch. I'll have to send you a few.
Yeah, send the links. Yeah, and I definitely take serious issue with with Tex Morrison you just mentioned, but that's
I'm
another.
Not surprised.
Yeah, that's another subject. But again, Adam, I'm just looking at the clock here.
Yep.
I appreciate you giving me this much time. But again, if you have my email now directly, if you ever if you hear me say something, if you have a question, feel free to ask me. Because again, what you see is what you get. Where we differ, we differ, and where we agree. But I believe that you sincerely see things the way you do, and that based on your research, these are your sincerely held conclusions, because of which you have great concern about Jewish world domination. That's my takeaway from this. That's just like I asked you about how you viewed my position. That's how I understand. The more we talk and hear things, okay, I see where you're coming from, despite our differences. So that's just so you know, that's where I'm coming from. So if someone asks me about you on the air, it's in that spirit that I'll respond. And the very fact that we had the dialogue means that I'm beholden to you, because you opened the door for this in a fair setting. Now I'd be totally shocked if after this you put up a series of videos mocking me and mocking my character and all that. But if you put up a series of videos, here's where I believe Dr. Brown's wrong, that wouldn't faze me at all. That would be, okay, I understand that. But if you then turned away from the way you're presenting yourself now, and you were just being nice because I'm on the air, and then I see your true colors, that would be a disappointment. But that's honestly not what I expect.
Well, if you followed my channel, you'd know that that's not what I'm about. And I appreciate you taking the time and being open for debate. Maybe do another one again. I know Stephen Ben-Danoon wants to have a talk with you. And, you're so open to debate. I wanted to, something else I wanted to say, and then I'll let you go because I know you're a few hours ahead of me, that you were never avoiding debate at any time. As soon as you heard that we had some differences, you invited me on. I was the one that hesitated. I thought somebody else would be better to do it first. And so I was never saying, oh, Brown's afraid to debate me. I never was saying anything like that. And but I did want to have my friend Christopher John Bjerknes join. And you said you didn't want to debate because you think he's not credible, but he thinks you're not credible in some way. So that's what the debate was supposed to be about. So maybe we could do that at some time as well.
And I appreciate you having me on without him. And I think it's better though for us to just have this interchange. And tonight we both present our views. It's not a debate in that I'm aggressively trying to tear down what you're saying, or you're aggressively trying to tear down what I'm saying. But it's an honest dialogue, which is very fruitful. And I don't want to say anything about Christopher with him not being here in terms of differences, but perhaps there'll be a future time where you facilitate it and the two of us actually have a debate on your. I'm open to that possibility. Not sure about it, but I'm open to that possibility. But at least we've had our dialogue, and I always try to do it. When I find out someone differs, I invite them on my show, or if they have a platform that's substantial, volunteer to go on theirs for this very purpose. At least let's put things out and let people decide what they decide.
I agree. Fantastic. All right, Dr. Brown. So where best place for people to find you? Let's get your plugs up here before we can wrap it up.
Sure.
I love this photo. I was going to ask you for a rocker photo. I was imagining I would see the mustache still, but
no, that was as I was growing my hair long. Yeah. I never got a shot like right before I cut it, and but that was me in my drug abusing days, growing my hair out and influenced by the Jimi Hendrixes and Led Zeppelins of the day. But if folks go to askdrbrown.org, askdrbrown.org, they'll get links to thousands of articles I've written. And if you have a conservative audience, they'll agree with a ton of what I've written. They'll find a lot of resources for reaching Jewish people with the gospel of Jesus. And then they can connect with me on Facebook, on Twitter, on YouTube, all there at the Ask Dr. Brown channel, askdrbrown.org. So connect with us on social media, and whether you agree or disagree, give me a listen anyway.
And call into the show if you want to comment on the debate. Your lines are always open for calls, right? Yeah.
In fact, tomorrow is the Thursday show is a Jewish focus, Thoroughly Jewish Thursday, 866-348-7884. So if they go to YouTube, AskDR Brown, from 3 to 4 in the afternoon, I'll be talking to my friend John Burness, but also taking calls if you want to call in. And then Friday, it's open for anything whatsoever. And then most days we try to open the phones, but by all means, call in, give your thoughts, And if Adam raised things to you and you feel, well, Dr. Brown, you didn't answer that sufficiently, and I want to challenge you further, please, please. I wish, Adam, that 1/1000th of the people who attack me online would call so we could actually talk. So again, thank you for having me on in a totally fair, gracious format. I really appreciate it. It means a lot to me, Adam. Thank you.
Thank you. I enjoyed it, and I think it was productive.
All right.
So you can stay on the line. I'll close it out here. Thank you, everybody, for watching. Let us know what you think in the comments. Who you think won the debate? No, just kidding. If it's questions I should have asked, your comments, thoughts, like, share, subscribe, and I'll see you guys in the next one. Oh, here we go. And...